The year was 2013. The internet oohed and awed over a fluffy dog from Japan. Wow, such meme. What a simple time. How blind we were to the horrors that awaited us. Because now it's 12 years later, and the richest man in the world has decided to make that dog our problem and fire a bunch of people in the federal government in the process. This week, we ask the question, hey buddy, what gives? From Battleborn Progress, this is Battleborn Bytes. My name is Jacob. Let's cook. Look, forgive me for not being the first one on this whole DOGE story, but in fairness, we've had a lot to cover here in the first month of Battleborn Bytes. But just for anyone who hasn't been glued to the news, here's some lightning fast backstory. After going dark MAGA in the middle of last year and absolutely refusing to stop jumping everywhere he went, despite how stupid it looked, world's richest man Elon Musk was given control of DOGE, the self-styled Department of Government Efficiency. Crucially, DOGE is neither really a government department for legal reasons, and not particularly efficient. More on that later. For a moment pre-inauguration last year, everyone thinks, hey, maybe this will be a big joke. Maybe who knows what they'll do. Turns out, not a joke, folks. Not a joke. Elon Musk and his broccoli-haired goon squad essentially start tearing wires out of the federal government just to see what would happen. They're running the same playbook Elon Musk used when he took over Twitter. Break things first, ask questions later. And in the process, they accessed some of the government's most sensitive databases, and based on the evidence, probably misunderstood them. But again, more on that later. And look, this is a little tangential to the rest of the episode, but I shouldn't have to know about a 19-year-old nicknamed Big Balls who's installed himself at one of the country's top cybersecurity agencies, even though he has a side gig selling AI bots to Russian Discord servers. But I do have to know that, actually. It's very important. And now you know too. So in the process, these young engineers, usually from Musk's other companies like Starlink or Tesla, have been installing themselves all over the federal government and just sort of rooting around in there. While they've been doing it, turns out Wired reported this week that they've been making salaries well in excess of $100,000, sometimes pulling the maximum possible salary that someone in their position in the government could possibly pull. Maybe this is a niche reference. This is all very evocative of the movie In the Loop. Has anyone seen the movie In the Loop?
No offense, son, but I mean, you look like you should still be at school with your head down a toilet.
Your first point there, the offense, I'm afraid I'm going to have to take it.
This was all done under the guise of cutting wasteful government spending, and okay, just first off here, they have done a terrible job at actually doing that, and that's not me saying that, that's DOGE saying that. So last month, DOGE publishes this wall of receipts where they list all of the cuts they've made to the federal government. Oh, look, we've cut billions of dollars in taxpayer spending. But the problem is that reporters at multiple outlets have gone through those numbers and basically found that they're a mess. That includes double counting or sometimes triple counting contracts. They've included contracts that were already set to be cut, that were going to expire anyways, or in some cases expired before Trump even took over. As a result, DOGE has already had to scrub their own website at least twice to remove some of the biggest savings from the pile. But to put it all into perspective, of the $55 billion that DOGE said it cut right at the beginning in the first few weeks of the Trump administration, an analysis from NPR found that only $2 billion, $2 billion out of $55 billion was actually cuts that DOGE made. So there you go.
I mean, it's one banana, Michael. What could it cost? $10?
At the same time, many of the job cuts that DOGE and the Trump administration are making have devastated the ranks of the federal workforce. Per a report from ABC News, there were over 200,000 employees who had been laid off by the end of February, and another 75,000 who had taken legally dubious buyout deals instead. That list of agencies includes, and forgive me, I'm going to need to read them off here, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Education Department, the Department of Homeland Security, including FEMA, which handles disaster relief, the Department of Energy, including some top nuclear workers, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Health and Human Services, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Department of the Interior, including national parks, the Office of Personnel Management, the General Services Administration, the Small Business Administration, the IRS, and the Department of Defense. Many of these firings are already being challenged in federal court, and it's not exactly clear where all of this is going to end up. But it's important here to stop real quick and talk about the language of some of this. A lot of the press releases about these firings have focused on the fact that these employees are quote-unquote probationary. But it's important to say probationary doesn't mean they're like literally on probation. All it means is that they're new or even have been promoted or transferred recently. All right, I hear you asking, but what does this mean for Nevada? If we look at Nevada in particular, we can see that the Social Security Administration, for instance, has had one of its buildings in Las Vegas slated for closure by DOGE, though they haven't said which building it's going to be or when it's going to close. Then there are administrative cuts at VA hospitals, which have included at least 11 administrative employees, although no official count is actually available. At Nevada Parks, 13 people were fired at Lake Mead, and another 5 people were fired at Great Basin National Park, which constitutes 20% of the entire workforce at Great Basin. And then there's the GSA, where all 12 employees who work for the agency in Nevada were fired late Monday. But these are people who handle things like security for federal buildings. And as of now, according to Senator Catherine Cortez Masto's office, we don't actually know what it means that these people got fired. There's also the bigger ripple effects that cutting employees at big agencies can have all across the country, including in Nevada. Take the IRS, for instance. Fewer agents can mean longer processing times, slower returns, and potentially a return to the way that the IRS used to audit people's tax returns. Because, frankly, it's much easier and cheaper for the IRS to audit low-income Americans than it is for them to audit high-income Americans. That might be especially true if the Trump administration goes through with a plan to cut as much as half of the IRS's workforce. Then let's look at the GSA again and the 18F program. This was a group of web developers who were focused on stuff like modernizing government websites and even creating something like the IRS's Free File program, which competes with TurboTax or H&R Block. Well, now 18F is totally gone. So much for the Department of Government Efficiency, I guess. Then there's stuff like getting rid of civil rights departments in some of these agencies, which will make it not only harder to prove discrimination in the workplace, but even if you do prove it, it'll make it harder to get anyone to do anything about it. These kinds of firings can also have knock-on effects. Look at the case of Whole Foods, for instance, where a store in Philadelphia voted to unionize. But then, after Trump fired a key member of the National Labor Relations Board, Whole Foods just said, well, if the NLRB isn't going to actually ratify that election, guess we don't have to recognize them now, do we? And then there are bigger questions about how this was all done in the first place. There are multiple agencies like the CDC or the Department of Energy where DOGE has taken a ready, fire, aim mentality. Just firing people wholesale, and then if it turns out they were important, wait, we're going to unfire you later. But often these people are fired, lose access to their email, and then can't be reached to be rehired in the first place. So this is how DOGE ends up firing workers who are, say, keeping tabs on the nuclear arsenal or working on controlling the bird flu, and then saying, oops. For anyone removed from this, it's almost difficult to comprehend the scale of the layoffs here. 20 layoffs, if they happened at your work, might be pretty rough. 200,000 layoffs, though? It's almost hard to internalize. But every single one of these people is another person who's just straight up out of a job. And now they're tossed onto a job market that's slowing down, not speeding up. For instance, take the story of Mark Wagstaff. He's a former Marine who until last month was working for the VA hospital in North Las Vegas. But Mark was a probationary employee, and now he's out of a job. Here he is speaking to KLAS 8 News Now in Las Vegas last week.
We want America to succeed, but at the same time, we want you to do it the right way and not just tear us down to the ground like we're less than human.
Separately, the Nevada Current spoke to even more veterans who had been fired as part of these federal employee purges. What they found were people who found purpose in being public servants, who didn't even have a chance to get into their emails to see the termination letter that fired them, and are now just left wondering who's going to advocate for them now. One of those veterans, Jim Fogelberg, said he thought he was fired because he was a veteran. And I'll quote him here now. I'm a veteran and I'm older. I think they looked at that and said, you were hired under a veteran's preference, therefore you're one of our DEI hires, so you're gone. As always, if you want to watch or read those full reports or read any of the stories I've talked about in today's episode, I've linked them down in the description below. There's no easy transition from that, so, well, if it isn't the news. First, a couple updates on some previous Born Bytes episode. Okay, on Medicaid, for instance, last week, after getting slammed by legislative Democrats over the potential cuts by congressional Republicans to Medicaid, Governor Joe Lombardo sent a letter to those same congressional Republicans telling them, please do not. It would be very bad. Meanwhile, guess what? Egg prices still going up. A report from The Guardian found that major egg producers are still using the bird flu as an excuse to keep raising prices, and in the meantime, they're pocketing record profits. But don't worry, the Trump administration's USDA chief is on the case. In a TV appearance this week, Secretary Brooke Rollins said, if you want cheaper eggs, why not try, and let me check my notes here, buying a chicken. If only I had thought of this. It's the perfect scheme. One chicken, please. Second, how about them tariffs? By now, you've probably heard about the Trump administration imposing 25% tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. And hoo boy, has that been a doozy for the stock market. It was actually such a doozy that on Wednesday, like 24 hours later, Trump announced that he was going to pause car tariffs, specifically for 1 month. Related, it's impossible to say where this goes next. You might remember the last time Trump threatened tariffs on Canada and Mexico. He immediately backed off. Who knows how long these tariffs last, but it's important to note here at what I should mention was the longest State of the Union or joint address to Congress in the history of this country. Trump said he planned on doing more tariffs in April. And because I can never edit one of these in peace, it's me, Editor Jacob, here to tell you that the Trump administration also paused the Mexico tariffs too for a month. So awesome. Just, cool. I love that policy is real until it is fake. Good. Excellent. All right, back to the video. In the meantime, prices are going up, GDP projections are going down, and I'm here to say, not stonks. But that does it for today's show. If you like what we're doing, like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube things to make sure you're first to know when we upload a new episode. But until then, this has been Born Bytes. We'll see you next week.